My name is Sharon Foster, and looking back, I should have known better than to trust the warmth in my brother's invitation. The drive from Vermont to Riverside, Connecticut, had taken us 4 hours. 4 hours of Maverick humming along to classic rock while our daughter Willa read in the back seat, her nose buried in a worn copy of Anne of Green Gables. 4 hours of our son Jude asking every 30 minutes if we were there yet. His excitement about seeing Uncle Reed bubbling over like soda left too long in the sun. Maverick had dressed the way he always did, a soft chambray shirt from LL Bean, khakis that had seen better days but fit him perfectly, and the brown leather loafers he'd resoled twice because he claimed they were finally broken in right. His salt and pepper hair was slightly tousled from the drive, and he wore that easy smile of a man completely comfortable in his own skin. I'd chosen a simple cream silk blouse and navy slacks, paired with my grandmother's pearl earrings. Willa wore a vintage Ralph Lauren dress I'd found at an estate sale, soft pink with delicate embroidery, the kind of quality that lasted decades. Jude had on his favorite polo shirt and pressed khakis, looking like a miniature preppy catalog model, though he'd already managed to wrinkle the front by the time we pulled up the long driveway shortly after 7 in the evening. The mansion rose before us like something out of a film, white columns gleaming in the early evening light, windows ablaze with chandeliers, the lawn manicured to golf course perfection. Luxury cars lined the circular drive, Mercedes, BMWs, a Bentley that probably cost more than most people's houses. Wow, Jude breathed, pressing his face against the window. Uncle Reed lives here? He rents here, I corrected gently, though my stomach was already tightening with unease. Maverick said nothing, but I caught the slight narrowing of his eyes as he took in the scene, that observational look he got when he was writing, cataloging details. Or at least, that's what everyone thought he was doing. I knew better. My husband was always watching, always calculating, though few people ever suspected. The quiet man who introduced himself as a freelance nature writer was anything more than exactly that. We parked between a Tesla and a Jaguar. Our Volvo wagon, reliable, safe, 8 years old, looked like the help's vehicle. The party spilled across the mansion's grand terrace and sprawling lawn. Women in designer dresses that probably cost what we spent on groceries in 6 months. Men in suits so sharp they could cut glass. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and the particular scent of wealth, that indefinable mix of privilege and exclusivity that makes the uninitiated feel like they're breathing different air. We made our way up the stone steps. Willa's hand found mine, her palm slightly damp. She was 9 and perceptive enough to sense when she didn't quite fit in, though she'd never say so. You look beautiful, sweetheart, I whispered to her. She squeezed my hand in response. A coordinator with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes intercepted us at the entrance. Names, please? Sharon Foster. This is my husband, Maverick Miller, and our children. She scanned her list, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly, not rude. Exactly, but cooler. Ah, yes, the Vermont family. Right this way. I felt Maverick's hand settle lightly on my lower back as we followed her through the crowd. We passed the VIP zone, a raised section of the terrace with the best view, the best lighting, intimate clusters of cocktail tables draped in ivory linen. That's where I spotted Reed, my younger brother, holding court in a navy suit that probably cost $3,000. He saw us. Our eyes met. For a moment, I expected him to wave us over, to introduce us proudly to his fiancée's circle. We'd driven 4 hours. I'd brought a gift, a first edition book I'd found for Helen, something I thought she'd appreciate. Instead, Reed's eyes flickered with something I'd never seen directed at me before: embarrassment. He glanced at the guests around him, all perfectly coiffed, all radiating that new money shine, then back at us in our L. Bean and vintage Ralph Lauren. He didn't move. The coordinator led us past the VIP zone, past the main seating area with its strategic proximity to the bar and the dance floor, past even the secondary tables. We ended up at a round table tucked in the corner near the kitchen door, where servers rushed past with trays and the music was muffled by the wall. The lighting was dimmer here. The view was of the service entrance. This was the fringe. Enjoy the party, the coordinator said, already turning away. Maverick pulled out a chair for me, his movements unhurried. He helped Willa into her seat, then Jude. When he finally sat down beside me, he was silent, but I saw his jaw tighten just barely, just enough. Mom, why are we sitting by the kitchen? Willa asked quietly. It's fine, honey. We can see everything from here. I lied, my voice bright. But we both knew. The seating wasn't random. It was a statement. Across the terrace, Reed laughed at something one of his guests said. Champagne flute raised high. He didn't look our way again. Maverick leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming once-twice against the tablecloth. To anyone watching, he looked relaxed, mildly interested in the spectacle around us. But I knew that look. I'd been married to this man for 12 years. He was taking notes, and Maverick Miller's notes always came with consequences. The party hummed around us like an exclusive machine we weren't meant to understand. Waiters glided past our corner table with barely a glance, their trays angled toward the VIP section. Laughter floated from the center of the terrace, where Reed and his fiancée Helen held court under strings of Edison bulbs that cast everything in a golden, flattering glow. Our corner had fluorescent spillover from the kitchen. Jude kicked his feet under the table, still excited despite our exile. When do we get to eat? I'm starving. Soon, buddy, Maverick said, ruffling his hair. He'd maintained that easy demeanor since we sat down, but I noticed he'd positioned his chair at a slight angle the better to observe the entire party. The writer's eye, people always said. Always watching for material. If only they knew. Movement caught my attention. Helen was gliding toward us, her champagne-colored dress catching light like spun sugar. She was beautiful in that calculated way, every hair in place, makeup applied with surgical precision, jewelry that announced its price tag without needing words. At 28, she'd perfected the art of looking expensive. She stopped at our table, smile fixed in place like a crown. Sharon! Her voice carried that particular tone of false warmth I'd heard before, usually right before someone delivered an insult wrapped in concern. I'm so glad you could make it all the way from Vermont. It must have been quite the journey. 4 hours, I said evenly. Not bad at all. Well, you're braver than me. I couldn't imagine living so far from civilization. She laughed, a tinkling sound. But I suppose that's the artistic lifestyle, isn't it? Reed told me you work for a nonprofit. That must be so. Fulfilling. The way she said fulfilling made it sound like a consolation prize. Maverick's hand found mine under the table, his thumb brushing my knuckles. A silent reminder. Let her talk. It is, I said simply. Helen's gaze swept over our children, lingering on Willa's dress. And this must be your daughter. What a sweet, vintage dress. Very quaint. Willa's smile faltered. At 9, she couldn't quite parse the insult buried in the compliment, but she felt its edge. It's Ralph Lauren, I said, my voice measured. From the 80s. Better quality than most things made today. Oh, absolutely. Vintage can be charming. Helen's smile sharpened. It's just that people here tend to prefer current collections, you know? Straight from the runway. But there's something to be said for making do with what you have. Very resourceful. Making do, as if we were one step from a thrift store out of necessity rather than choice. A waiter appeared at the VIP section with a tray of canapés. Helen excused herself with a graceful wave and returned moments later, shepherding a small group of guests in our direction like a safari guide pointing out exotic specimens. Everyone, this is Sharon Reed's sister. She gestured at me with her champagne flute. She lives secluded in Vermont to find artistic inspiration, and works for a nonprofit. A life that is, well, very chill, but surely a bit removed from our fast-paced world, isn't it? The guests smiled politely, their eyes sliding over us with practiced disinterest. I could read the narrative Helen was spinning, the sister who couldn't hack it in the real world, who'd fled to the countryside to play at being rustic, who now attended events like this as a reminder of what she'd left behind or failed to achieve. Actually, Maverick said mildly, speaking for the first time since Helen arrived, Sharon manages complex projects with multiple stakeholders and 7-figure budgets. The nonprofit sector requires quite a bit of pace, just less emphasis on profit margins. His tone was pleasant, conversational even. But there was steel underneath the kind that most people missed, because Maverick had perfected the art of seeming harmless. Helen's smile didn't waver. Of course! Nonprofits are so important. Though I imagine the salary must be quite modest compared to the private sector. But that's the sacrifice one makes for passion, right? She moved on before I could respond, her entourage following like ducklings. Jude tugged on my sleeve. Mom, I'm really hungry. Can I get one of those things they're carrying around? The buffet table had been set up near the VIP zone, a stunning display of delicacies under warming lights. Jude was already sliding out of his chair when Helen materialized again, as if summoned by his interest. "Oh, Jude." She crouched down to his level, her dress pooling around her like liquid gold. "I'm not sure those appetizers are quite right for you, sweetheart." "Why not?" Jude asked, guileless. "Well, they're foie gras and caviar, very acquired tastes. I'm afraid since you haven't had proper palate training, you'll find them hard to swallow." She tilted her head sympathetically. "Tell you what, I'll have the kitchen make something friendlier for you. How about spaghetti? Or fried chicken? I'm sure you're more used to those at home." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Your family only knows fast food and simple fare. You don't belong at this table, literally or figuratively. Jude looked confused. "But I like trying new things." "No need, Helen." I stood, placing my hand on Jude's shoulder. My voice was quiet but firm. "The children will sit here and eat with their parents. We teach our kids to experience everything. They don't need to be separated." For the first time, Helen's smile cracked slightly. "I was only trying to help." "We don't need help." I guided Jude back to his chair. "But thank you." Helen straightened, her expression cooling several degrees. She glanced at Maverick, perhaps expecting him to contradict me, to apologize for his wife's stubbornness. But Maverick just smiled blandly at her, the way he smiled at everyone, pleasant, forgettable, utterly unreadable. "Suit yourself," Helen said finally, "though I'd hate for the children to be uncomfortable." She swept away, leaving a wake of expensive perfume and unspoken judgment. The table fell silent. Willa picked at her napkin. Jude's excitement had dimmed considerably. Across the terrace, Reed remained absorbed in his VIP bubble, laughing and toasting, completely unaware or willfully ignorant that his fiancée was treating his family like second-class citizens. Maverick leaned over to Jude. "Hey, buddy, want to know a secret?" Jude nodded. "The best food at parties is always whatever you enjoy most. Doesn't matter if it's caviar or chicken fingers. If it makes you happy, it's the best." He winked. "And between you and me, I'd take a good burger over fish eggs any day." Jude giggled, some of his sparkle returning. But I saw the way Maverick's gaze tracked Helen across the terrace, the way his jaw set just slightly tighter. My husband was many things: patient, observant, slow to anger, but he was also fiercely protective, and someone had just insulted his children. I had a feeling Helen had no idea what she'd just set in motion. The party had reached its crescendo by 10 minutes to 8, but at our table, I was halfway through explaining to Jude why he couldn't have a third canapé when I noticed Willa's empty chair. My daughter had excused herself to the restroom 10 minutes ago. The knot in my stomach tightens. I stand, scanning the crowd for her blonde head, her vintage Ralph Lauren cardigan, the one I'd found at an estate sale, pristine condition, better quality than anything in Helen's closet. Then I see her. Willa is walking back toward our dark corner, but something's wrong. Her shoulders are hunched forward, her arms wrapped around herself like she's trying to disappear. Even from here, I can see the redness around her eyes, the way she's blinking too fast. She slides into her chair without looking at me. "Willa?" I lean closer, keeping my voice low. "Honey, what happened?" She shakes her head, her jaw clenched tight. That's when I know it's bad. Willa doesn't cry easily, she's too much like me, holding everything in until it cracks. "Sweetheart, talk to me." Her voice comes out strangled, barely above a whisper. "Can we just go home?" My heart breaks. What happened? "Some kids." She swallows hard. "There were these girls by the bathroom. They were maybe 12 or 13 and they pointed at my shoes." I looked down at her feet. The suede flats, soft taupe, classic silhouette, worn but well-maintained. I'd bought them at a vintage boutique in Vermont because they were real quality, the kind that lasts, they said. Willa's voice cracks. "They said I was wearing poor person shoes. They asked if we got them from a donation bin because they looked so old." The rage that floods through me is white-hot and instantaneous. My 9-year-old daughter. My sensitive, brilliant girl who reads 3 grades above her level and volunteers at the animal shelter every weekend. Mocked. For shoes. I reach for her hand, but before I can say anything, I hear the click of heels on marble. Helen materializes at our table like a shark scenting blood. "Oh dear, is everything all right?" Her voice drips with false concern, pitched just loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Several guests turn to look, champagne flutes pausing mid-sip. We're fine, I say flatly. Are you sure? Because Willa looks upset. Helen tilts her head, her expression a practiced mask of sympathy. Did something happen? I open my mouth, but Willa speaks first, her voice small. Some girls made fun of my shoes. Helen's eyes flick down to Willa's suede flats, and I see it that microsecond of satisfaction before she arranges her face into understanding. Oh, sweetheart. She crouches down, putting herself at Willa's eye level in a performance of compassion. You know, children here are raised differently. Their parents are business leaders, philanthropists. These kids are being groomed for Yale, for Harvard. They have very refined standards. My fingers curl into fists under the table. Helen continues, her voice taking on a teacherly tone. Honestly, Sharon, I've been worried about this. The children they're not used to, well, to being in environments like this. Living so isolated up in Vermont, without regular exposure to proper social settings. She sighs, shaking her head. It causes culture shock. They don't understand the expectations. The words hang in the air like poison. She's not defending Willa. She's defending the bullies. Maybe next time? Helen says, standing and smoothing her dress. You could prepare them better? Make sure their clothing is more appropriate for the occasion? It would save everyone the awkwardness. The crowd is watching now. I can feel their eyes on us, on my children, judging. Helen's implication is crystal clear. This is your fault, Sharon. You brought your backwoods children to a place they don't belong, dressed them like charity cases, and now everyone's uncomfortable. I'm shaking. I want to scream, to tell her exactly what I think of her and her refined standards, to drag her outside, but I'm frozen, because Reed is here, somewhere in this crowd, and he's my brother, my only sibling. If I make a scene, if I cause chaos at his engagement party, I'll be the villain in this story. I stand abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. Helen's smile widens, victorious. She thinks she's won. Then Maverick stands. The change in him is immediate and terrifying. Gone is the gentle, soft-spoken man who spent dinner quietly eating pasta. The air around him seems to drop 10 degrees. He stands to his full height, moving with the kind of controlled precision that makes people instinctively step back. He doesn't say a word. He simply stands there, one hand adjusting the button of his suit jacket that fits him like it was painted on, and the silence spreads outward like ripples in water. Conversations die, mid-sentence. Glasses stop clinking. Maverick doesn't look at Helen. He looks at me. His blue eyes are calm, cold, and completely focused. There's a question in them, one we've asked each other 1,000 times in our 17 years together. Have you had enough? It's the same look he gave me the day I told him about the harassment at my old job. The same look before he quietly made a phone call that resulted in my former boss being audited by the IRS. Maverick doesn't make threats. He doesn't need to. I think about Willa's red eyes, about Jude's confusion when he couldn't have a burger, about being shoved into a dark corner while Helen parades around in a dress that costs more than our monthly grocery bill. I think about my brother, who I drove 4 hours to celebrate, who hasn't once come to check on us. I look at Maverick and nod. The decision is made. Helen's smile falters as she realizes something has shifted. She takes a small step back, her eyes darting between us, suddenly uncertain. Maverick's expression doesn't change. He reaches down, helping Willa out of her chair with infinite gentleness, then does the same for Jude. We're leaving, I say, my voice steady now. And in that moment, with my husband's silent strength at my back and my children's hands in mine, I choose their dignity over my brother's party. I choose us. Several nearby conversations paused. I can feel the attention shifting toward us, the whispers starting. Helen's uncertainty evaporates instantly, replaced by barely concealed triumph. She straightens, that megawatt smile returning full force. You know what? I think that's probably the smartest decision you could make right now. Her voice carries, projecting to the growing audience of guests pretending not to stare. This is my house, after all. Mine and Reed's. I have to maintain a certain image for our business partners, our investors. She emphasizes those last words, letting them land like stones. My house, My house. My house. The claim hangs in the air, territorial and absolute. She's not just dismissing us, she's evicting us. From her domain. Like we're trespassers who've overstayed our welcome. I'm gathering Willa's small purse when I catch at a flicker of something crossing Maverick's face. Not anger. Not indignation. A smirk. It's gone in an instant, so quick I almost think I imagined it. But I know my husband. I've seen that expression exactly 3 times in our marriage. Once before he negotiated a hostile takeover, once before he systematically dismantled a competitor who tried to poach his entire executive team, and once before he outbid a Russian oligarch for a property in Manhattan just to prove a point. It's the look of a man who's been handed exactly what he wanted. Sharon? Sharon? Reed's voice cuts through the murmur of the crowd. He's pushing through the guests, his face flushed and confused, his tie slightly askew. He looks tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that comes from trying to keep up appearances all night. What's going on? He reaches our table, eyes darting between me and Helen. Why are you guys leaving already? Helen immediately shifts gears, her hand flying to her chest in a gesture of wounded innocence. Oh, Reed, honey, it's not. I mean, Sharon said she wanted to leave. I think she's just not comfortable here. The vibe isn't really. She trails off delicately, letting him fill in the blanks. The implication is clear. Your sister doesn't fit in with our crowd. Reed's face crumples with guilt and confusion. Sharon, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for you to feel. He runs a hand through his hair, making it stand up in stressed peaks. Maybe you should take the kids back to the hotel? Let them rest? You must be tired from the drive and... He's apologizing. To me. For Helen's behavior. And he has no idea. My brother, standing in this mansion's grand foyer, surrounded by crystal and marble and imported flowers, actually believes he lives here. Believes this is his home, his party, his life. He has no clue that every piece of furniture he's lounging on, every room he's hosting in, every inch of this partnership with Helen exists because Maverick decided to be generous 3 years ago. Reed thinks he's the host, the master of the house. In reality, he's a tenant, whose lease is about to expire. It's fine, Reed, I say quietly, slipping my arm around Willa's shoulders. We'll get out of your way. No, it's not. He's flustered now, aware that people are watching, that this doesn't look good. You came all this way. I wanted you to be here. Reed, sweetheart. Helen touches his arm, her voice honey-sweet. Let them go. Sharon clearly wants to leave, and we have guests to attend to. The Castellanos were asking about the investment timeline, and... She's steering him away, redirecting his attention like she always does. Reed's shoulders sag in defeat. He shoots me one more apologetic look before allowing himself to be led back toward the center of the party, toward the lights and the laughter and the people who matter in Helen's world. Maverick is silent beside me, helping Jude into his jacket with methodical care, but I see it again, that tiny quirk at the corner of his mouth when Helen said, "My house." Maverick? I murmur as we start toward the door. Not yet, he says softly. His voice is calm, almost pleasant, but there's something underneath it, something that makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. We're almost to the foyer when Helen's voice rings out behind us, bright and performative. Drive safely. And Sharon, maybe next time, let us know if you need recommendations for the children's clothing. I know some wonderful boutiques that aren't too expensive. The laughter that follows is polite but present. Several guests are openly watching now, champagne flutes in hand, entertained by the drama. Willa's hand tightens in mine. Maverick stops walking. He doesn't turn around, doesn't react visibly, but something shifts in the air, a change in pressure, like right before a thunderstorm breaks. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out his phone. The motion is casual, unhurried. He taps the screen a few times, scrolling through something. Actually, he says, his voice carrying effortlessly across the marble foyer. Before we go, there's something I need to discuss with Reed. The room goes quiet. Helen's smile freezes. I'm sorry, what? Maverick finally turns, and the look on his face is pleasant, professional. The expression of someone about to discuss a minor contract detail. Reed, he calls out. Could you come here for a moment? It's about the house. My brother emerges from the crowd again, now looking completely bewildered. The house? What about... The lease, Maverick says simply. I wanted to give you proper notice in person, since we're all here. Reed blinks. Notice? What notice? And just like that, the trap springs shut. The party noise seemed to fade into a dull hum as Maverick stepped forward. There was something different about him now. The quiet, amiable writer had vanished, replaced by someone who moved with the confidence of a man who'd spent decades in boardrooms where millions changed hands with a signature. Reed, Maverick said, his voice low but carrying an authority that made several nearby guests turn their heads. Do you remember the name of the parent company on the lease you signed? My brother blinked. Confusion, replacing the embarrassment that had been written across his face moments before. What? Why would that matter right now? Just answer the question, Maverick said, his tone patient but unyielding. Reed's forehead creased as he searched his memory. I think it's Ironwood Holdings? I honestly don't remember the details. I just signed through the agent 3 years ago. Is there a problem with the property management or something? The corner of Maverick's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. He pulled out his phone with deliberate slowness, scrolled for a moment, then turned the screen toward Reed. Read it. Out loud. Reed leaned forward, squinting at the illuminated text. His lips moved silently at first, then his voice emerged, shaky and confused. Internal directive, dated April 2020. From V. Miller, Chairman. Subject, Foster Account Exception. He paused, his face going pale. Approve exception for Reed Foster's residential file. Freeze 2020 rental rates indefinitely, regardless of market adjustments. Any difference between frozen rate and current market value is to be accounted for in the chairman's family charity adjustment account. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the string quartet seemed to sense something monumental happening and let their music trail off, plunging the terrace into a deadly stillness. I don't, Reed's voice cracked. What does this mean? Helen had gone utterly still beside him, her champagne flute frozen halfway to her lips. I watched as understanding began to dawn on her face slowly at first, then all at once, like watching ice crack across a frozen pond. It means, Maverick said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet gathering, that the luxurious lifestyle you've been enjoying for the past 3 years has been subsidized. Heavily subsidized. The market rate for this property is currently $4,200 per month. You've been paying $2,800, the frozen 2020 rate. That's a difference of $16,800 per year. Over 3 years, that's $50,400 in effective charity. Reed staggered backward as if he'd been physically struck. No, that's not. I can afford this place. I make good money. You make a good salary, Maverick corrected gently. But you're not rich, Reed. You're what financial advisors call a Henry High earner, not rich yet. You spend everything you make trying to maintain an image that's beyond your actual means. Without the subsidy, you couldn't afford this address. You certainly couldn't afford it while also funding those European vacations and the luxury car lease and the country club membership Helen insisted on. I watched my brother's face crumble. Watched him realize that every dismissive comment Helen had made about people who don't understand quality, every sneering remark about knowing your place in the world, all of it had been built on a Daggio foundation of charity. Charity from the man she'd been mocking all evening. Maverick turned to Helen, whose face had transformed from its usual haughty composure into something raw and exposed. You're right about one thing, Helen. Class cannot be faked. Real class isn't about designer labels or knowing which fork to use or making sure everyone sees your expensive watch. Real class is about character, about how you treat people when you think they can't do anything for you. He paused, letting his words sink in. Around us, the gathered guests stood transfixed, their cocktails forgotten. The class you've been so proud of for 3 years, this address, this lifestyle, this social standing, it's been funded by my family's charity. Every time you look down on someone for wearing Bean, instead of Louis Vuitton, every time you judge someone's worth by their clothes or their car, you were doing it from a position you didn't actually earn. You were living on borrowed elegance. Helen's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved to clean it up. Now, Maverick continued, and his voice took on the crisp, business-like tone I'd only heard him use during the rare phone calls he couldn't avoid. As chairman and majority owner of Ironwood Holdings, I am formally notifying you, Reed Foster, that I am exercising my right of non-renewal as outlined in Section 12, Paragraph 3 of your lease agreement. Your current lease expires on the 30th of next month. You have exactly 30 days to secure alternative housing that aligns with your actual budget. The property repossession process will proceed according to Connecticut state law and the terms of your contract. Maverick, please. Reed's voice broke. You can't just... I'm not evicting you, Maverick said, and there was almost kindness in his voice now. That would be cruel and unnecessary. I'm simply declining to renew your lease at the end of its natural term, which is my legal right as the property owner. 30 days is more than sufficient time to find appropriate housing. I'd suggest looking at the developments off Route 7. Nice places, good schools nearby, much more aligned with your actual income bracket. He slipped his phone back into his pocket, those same khaki pockets Helen had mocked earlier for being tragically suburban, and reached for my hand. As for the question of whose house this is, he said, glancing at Helen with something that might have been pity, I think we've established that definitively. But don't worry, you have 30 days to enjoy it. I'd suggest you make the most of them. The crowd parted as we moved toward the door, everyone suddenly very interested in their shoes or their drinks or anything other than meeting our eyes. I could feel their stares on our backs, could practically hear the mental recalculations happening as they reassessed everything they'd assumed about the quiet couple in the practical clothes. At the door, Reed caught up to us, his face streaked with tears. Maverick, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know you were. Maverick paused, turning back. His hand came up to rest on Reed's shoulder, not unkindly but firm. I know you didn't. That was intentional. But Reed, you need to understand something. Your value as a person has nothing to do with this address or that car or any of it. When you figure out where your true worth lies, when you can see it in yourself without needing these expensive props to prove it, then we'll talk. Really talk. But until then... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The cool night air hit my face as we stepped outside, and I drew in a deep breath that felt like the first real breath I'd taken in hours. Behind us, the mansion glowed with warm light, but the warmth was deceptive. I could still feel the chill of judgment that had permeated every corner. Willa's hand squeezed mine as we walked toward the car. Mama, are we leaving without saying goodbye? Sometimes, I told her. The best goodbye is just walking away with your head held high. Jude was practically bouncing on his toes, his earlier misery forgotten in the excitement of the dramatic exit. Dad was so cool. Did you see Aunt Helen's face? She looked like she swallowed a lemon. Jude, I said, but there was no real reproach in my voice. Maverick unlocked the car, our practical, 7-year-old Subaru with the dent in the rear bumper from when I'd misjudged the garage wall, and we all climbed in. As he started the engine, I glanced back at the mansion one last time. Through the tall windows, I could see figures moving, gathering, no doubt dissecting everything that had just happened. Reed stood on the front steps, Helen nowhere to be seen. I almost feel bad for him, I murmured. Don't, Maverick said, pulling out of the circular driveway. This is the kindest thing I could do for him. He's been living in a fantasy, and fantasies always end. Better to end it now, on our terms, than to let him crash even harder down the line. We drove in silence for a few minutes, leaving Riverside's manicured perfection behind us. Then Willa's small voice piped up from the back seat. Daddy? Are we richer than Miss Helen? I twisted in my seat to look at her. In the passing streetlights, her face was thoughtful, not proud or gloating, just trying to understand. Why didn't you say so earlier? She continued. When she was being mean about our clothes? Maverick caught her eye in the rearview mirror, and I saw that gentle smile I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. That's a good question, sweetheart. And here's the thing. Being rich isn't about showing off or making sure everyone knows how much money you have. It's definitely not about yelling at waiters or making people feel small. He paused at a red light, taking the moment to turn around and look at both kids. True wealth, real wealth, is having the power to protect your family and set things right without needing to raise your voice. It's being secure enough in who you are that you don't need everyone else's approval. Today, I taught Miss Helen a lesson in respect, something all her money and designer clothes can never buy her. But she was so mean to you, Willa said, her voice small. She called your jacket tragic. She did, Maverick agreed, facing forward as the light turned green. And you know what? It is a 10-year-old jacket from LL Bean. The elbow patches are wearing thin, and it's probably not what anyone would call fashionable. But it's comfortable. It keeps me warm. And it reminds me of who I really am under all the business suits and board meetings. Sometimes the most expensive thing you can wear is authenticity. Jude, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly asked, "What's going to happen to Uncle Reed and Aunt Helen?" I considered the question carefully. They're going to have to learn to stand on their own 2 feet, to build a life based on what they actually have, not on what they're pretending to have. "Will Uncle Reed be okay?" Willa asked. "Eventually," I said, and I believed it. Your uncle is smart and capable when he's not trying so hard to impress people. This might be the wake-up call he needs. As for Helen, I trailed off, uncertain. "She made her choices," Maverick finished quietly. "We all do. And then, we live with them." The lights of Riverside faded behind us, giving way to darker roads, older trees, the authentic Connecticut that existed beyond the manufactured perfection of new money enclaves. Our headlights carved a path through the gathering darkness, leading us home not to a mansion that required a trust fund to maintain, but to our farmhouse in Vermont with its creaky floors and drafty windows and garden where we grew actual vegetables. Willa yawned, her head drooping against Jude's shoulder. In the rearview mirror, I watched my children settle into the comfortable silence of a car ride home, the drama already fading from their minds. They'd remember this night, I knew they would, but not as trauma. As a lesson, Maverick's hand found mine across the center console, his calloused writer's fingers intertwining with my own. We didn't need to say anything. We'd weathered the storm together, protected our children, and walked away with our dignity intact. We hadn't won because we had more money. We'd won because we knew who we were, and no amount of judgment from people living beyond their means could change that. The car carried us forward into the peaceful night, leaving behind the glittering facade of borrowed elegance, heading toward something real.